Rain poured over Manhattan like a curtain of glass, each droplet catching the city lights before dying on the pavement. The streets shimmered in gold and gray, and the hum of distant traffic merged with the hollow echo of thunder. Emily Carter pulled her thin jacket tighter, her breath shallow, one hand pressed to her right hip. She had just finished another 12-hour shift at the hospital, and her body ached from exhaustion. Her sneakers splashed through puddles as she crossed the empty parking lot toward her small car. The glow of the hospital still bleeding into the mist behind her. The air smelled of disinfectant and rain. She was almost there when her leg gave way. A sharp pain shot through her hip, making her gasp. Her vision blurred. She reached for the hood of a nearby car to steady herself, but slipped on the slick asphalt and collapsed to her knees. The world tilted. Her palms scraped the wet ground. A warm trickle slid down her thigh. She looked down and saw blood spreading through the torn seam of her uniform. Her heart pounded wildly. It was not just a fall. Something inside her felt wrong. The ache was deep, raw, frightening. She tried to rise, but her limbs refused to obey. Headlights swept across her as a black sedan slowed at the end of the row. For a moment, she thought it was just another driver leaving, but then the engine stopped. The door opened and a man stepped out, holding an umbrella against the rain. His silhouette was sharp against the lights, tall and steady, like someone used to being obeyed. Alexander Reed had just left a charity gala downtown. The event was meant to promote the Reed Foundation's new initiative for domestic violence survivors, a cause he supported with public generosity but private detachment. He disliked the way people treated him like a savior. When he knew the truth, his money did not erase the loneliness that filled his glass penthouse each night. The rain had caught him unprepared, and his driver was waiting nearby with the heater running. He would have left without stopping if he had not seen the movement near the parked cars. "Hey," he called out, voice low but clear through the rain. "Are you all right?" Emily tried to answer, but pain tightened her throat. He came closer, the beam from a nearby streetlight illuminating her face, pale, trembling, soaked through. Her eyes fluttered open and met his for a fleeting second, gray eyes against brown, the city's chaos reflected between them. She whispered, barely audible, "It hurts. Down there too." The words were fragile, almost childlike, yet they froze him where he stood. He knelt beside her, keeping his voice calm, his movements slow. He had dealt with emergencies before, but this felt different, personal, immediate. "Don't move," he said gently. "I'm calling for help." He took out his phone and dialed 911, giving the address to the dispatcher. His umbrella tilted, rain soaking the shoulder of his tuxedo. She flinched at the sound of sirens approaching in the distance, as if afraid of being found. When he noticed her trembling, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her. She shivered, clutching the fabric. "You're going to be fine," he said. His tone carried authority, the kind that made people listen. The paramedics arrived within minutes. As they examined her, Alexander stayed back, keeping his distance but watching everything. When one of the medics lifted the torn fabric around her hip, Alexander caught a glimpse of a bruise spreading along her thigh. A deep purple mark edged in red, too uneven for an accident. His breath caught. The medic exchanged a brief look with his partner, then spoke in a hushed tone. "This might be more than a fall," he murmured. Alexander's gaze returned to Emily. Her face turned away, wet strands of hair clinging to her cheek. Shame flickered in her eyes, sharp as lightning. He recognized it instantly, the look of someone who had been hurt before. They loaded her onto the stretcher, covering her with a thermal blanket. She tried to push his jacket back to him, but he pressed it into her hands. "Keep it," he said softly. "You'll need it more than I do." As the ambulance doors closed, one of the paramedics asked if he was family. Alexander hesitated. "Just make sure she gets to St. Luke's. I'll handle the expenses." Rain splattered across his face as the vehicle pulled away. The street went quiet again, except for the whisper of water draining into the gutters. He stood there for a long moment, his tuxedo drenched, his phone still in his hand. His thoughts tangled. He should have walked away. People got hurt in New York every night. It was not his job to save them. Yet as he replayed the image of that bruise, that whispered confession, something inside him refused to let it go. A memory surfaced, the sound of another voice years ago, pleading through static over a broken phone line. His late wife crying for help on the night he was too busy closing a deal to answer. The guilt still haunted him, a shadow that never lifted. Now standing in the rain, he felt that same weight press against his chest. The driver opened the car door, holding out a towel. "Sir, we should get you home." Alexander nodded slowly but did not move. His eyes followed the red taillights of the ambulance disappearing down the avenue. "Find out where they're taking her," he said quietly. The driver hesitated. The woman, "Sir, yes," Alexander replied. Slipping into the car at last. "I want to make sure she's all right." As the sedan rolled through the storm, the city lights blurred into ribbons of gold and silver. He loosened his tie and leaned back, listening to the rhythmic drumming of rain on glass. The image of her pale face would not fade, neither would the echo of her voice, soft, broken, unbearably human. He did not know her name, he did not know her story, but he knew one thing with certainty: he would see her again. When Emily opened her eyes, the room around her was too bright to belong to a hospital she could afford. The ceiling was smooth white, and the air smelled of lavender and antiseptic. She blinked slowly and saw an IV line taped to her wrist. Her body felt heavy, as if anchored to the bed. A monitor beeped softly beside her. A nurse entered and smiled politely. "Good morning, Miss Carter." Emily nodded weakly and asked where she was. "Reed Medical Center," the nurse replied. "You were brought in last night. The gentleman who found you made sure you were taken care of." Emily frowned. "The man in the rain." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, he said not to worry about the bills. You should rest now." When the nurse left, Emily stared at the bouquet of lavender on the bedside table. The color softened the sterile room, yet the scent pulled something fragile inside her chest. She did not remember much after collapsing, but she remembered a man's voice, calm and distant, like thunder far away. Across the city, Alexander Reed walked through the marble lobby of his private hospital. The security team nodded as he passed. He had not slept. The memory of that night still clung to him. His assistant James met him near the elevators holding a tablet. "She's stable," James reported. "No fractures but heavy bruising on her hip and leg. The doctors suspect trauma, maybe a previous injury reopened." Alexander stepped into the elevator, his reflection mirrored in the metal walls. "Has she said who she is?" "No ID except her badge from City." General James answered. "She asked for discharge this morning, but the doctor refused. She looks terrified." The doors opened on the VIP floor. Alexander paused outside room 503, watching through the glass. The girl was awake, sitting upright, her hair tangled, her gaze fixed on the lavender bouquet. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, the same bruised fragility he had seen in too many shelters. He signaled James to stay back and entered quietly. Emily turned sharply, clutching the blanket. "Who are you?" He raised a hand. "Alexander Reed. I was the one who called the ambulance." Her eyes flicked to his tailored suit and back to his face, uncertain whether to thank or distrust him. "Why am I here?" "You collapsed," he said simply. "The doctors wanted to keep you under observation. I have a foundation that sponsors this wing. I made sure they didn't send you home too soon." "You paid for this?" Her tone carried disbelief. "It wasn't charity," he replied. "It was the right thing to do." Silence stretched between them. She touched the lavender petals as if grounding herself. "I can't stay," she said finally. "Someone might look for me." He caught the tremor in her voice. "You're safe here." "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." She pressed her lips together and looked away. "I fell," she muttered. "That's all." Alexander's expression did not change, but the faint tension in his jaw did. Later in the hallway, Dr. Patel stopped him. "Mr. Reed, off the record. Those bruises don't look like a simple fall. She's hiding something." Alexander's brow furrowed. "Is she in danger? Possibly. Psychological trauma, too." Alexander thanked him and returned to his office, overlooking the skyline. Rain streaks still traced the glass, though the storm had passed. He could not shake the feeling that fate had thrown him back into a story he thought ended years ago. That evening, he asked James to run a discreet background check using the hospital badge number. The report came within hours. Emily Carter, age 27, registered nurse, previous address Queens. No criminal record, but had resigned from her position abruptly 6 months ago. Attached were old news headlines, a photographer accused of harassment, the case dismissed for lack of evidence. One of the photos in the file showed Emily leaving a courthouse, her head down as reporters shouted questions. Alexander closed the tablet slowly. His hand rested on the lavender sprig he had taken from her bouquet. He thought of the bruise he had seen and the way she had whispered through pain. Later that night, he returned to the hospital. The hall was dim, except for the soft glow of emergency lights. Inside the room, Emily was half asleep, murmuring in distress. He stopped at the doorway, not wanting to startle her. She whispered fragments of a plea. "Please don't let him find me." He stood motionless, letting the words sink in. The nurse passing by gave him a questioning look. "Bad dreams," he said quietly. "Just make sure no one visits her without clearance." The nurse nodded. When he finally left, he could still hear the soft, uneven rhythm of her breathing. Outside, the sky cleared. The city glittered beneath him as his car moved through the wet streets. Alexander stared out the window, lost in thought. He had seen power destroy lives in boardrooms, but this was different. This was fear carved into skin. He could have looked away, but he would not. Not this time. In her hospital bed, Emily opened her eyes to the faint light of dawn. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to sleep, yet the safety frightened her more than the pain. She did not know that a man she barely met had already begun to unravel her mystery piece by piece. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the hospital blinds, painting thin lines of gold across the white sheets. Emily stirred awake, her body still sore, but the sharp pain had eased. The lavender bouquet on the bedside table had begun to open, fully filling the room with a gentle fragrance that reminded her of something she could not name. Peace, perhaps. or the memory of a place untouched by fear. A quiet knock sounded, and Alexander appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 paper cups. He wore a simple gray sweater this time instead of a suit, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he had not slept again. "Coffee," he said. "The real kind, not hospital sludge." She hesitated before nodding. He placed 1 cup near her and moved to the window, keeping a respectful distance. The silence stretched, but it was not uncomfortable, only strange in its calm. "You don't have to come here," she said finally. "I'm fine." He looked at her reflection in the glass. "You said that last night while bleeding in the rain." "I heal fast. Maybe on the outside," he murmured. She frowned, unsure if he meant to challenge her or comfort her. The doctor entered with her chart, checked vitals, and gave instructions for rest and medication. As he left, he nodded to Alexander with familiarity, a sign that this was not the first morning visit. Emily noticed, "You've been here every day, only since you refused to talk to anyone else. You're wasting your time." He turned to face her then. "Maybe, but time's the only thing I can afford to waste." There was no arrogance in his voice, only an exhaustion that felt older than him. She looked away again, focusing on the lavender. The petals trembled slightly under the breeze from the vent. Later, when the nurse came to change her bandage, Emily insisted on doing it herself, but the nurse refused. Alexander stepped out of the room, waiting in the hallway, his hands folded. He stared at the floor, listening to the muffled sound of her wince behind the closed door. It reminded him too much of his late wife's last hospital night. Her voice weak over the monitor as he signed business contracts from his phone. When the door opened, Emily's eyes caught him standing there. He looked away quickly, pretending to study a painting. "You can come in," she said softly. "They're done." He entered cautiously. "I didn't want to intrude." "You already have." Her tone was half teasing, half defensive. "Why lavender?" she asked after a pause. "It helps calm the mind," he said, "and you looked like you could use some calm. That obvious only to someone who remembers what fear looks like." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she asked quietly, "What did you lose?" He blinked, surprised. "Everyone who carries empathy lost something first," she said. He nodded slowly. "My wife," he admitted. 5 years ago. Wrong place, wrong time." Her eyes softened. "I'm sorry. So am I," he whispered. The confession seemed to hang in the sterile air before dissolving into silence. That evening, he brought another lavender sprig, freshly cut from the hospital garden. He placed it near the window, next to the cup of coffee he always left for her at dawn. The nurse began to notice the pattern and whispered to colleagues about the billionaire who came without cameras or entourage. Emily overheard once and felt heat rise to her cheeks. She told herself it did not matter, but she found herself waiting for the sound of his footsteps every morning. On the 4th day, she tried to stand. Her legs trembled, but she managed a few steps to the window where sunlight spilled across the sill. When Alexander arrived, she was there upright, pale but defiant. "You shouldn't be on your feet yet," he said. "I'm tired of lying down. You'll tear the stitches. You sound like my doctor. He works for me." "So do I now," she asked with a small bitter laugh. He almost smiled. "Only if you take my coffee." She took the cup from him. Their fingers brushed. The contact was brief, but enough to send a ripple through the quiet. She sat on the edge of the bed, sipping slowly. "You act like you have to fix me," she said. "I don't even know you." "You don't have to," he replied. "Sometimes strangers listen better than friends." She considered this. Why are you so calm? Because if I let myself feel everything I should, I'd fall apart. The honesty startled her. She studied him for a moment, then said, "You hide it well." He gave a faint smile. "So do you." Days passed in this rhythm. Small exchanges, quiet moments that spoke louder than grand gestures. He would enter, leave a coffee, sit by the window, while she read or watched the rain that returned every evening like a patient ghost. One night, thunder rolled again over the city. The sound made her flinch. He noticed from his chair. "You all right? Just a storm," she murmured, but her hand clenched the blanket. He turned on the lamp beside her, the soft yellow light washing over the room. "Better," she nodded. "I used to hate the dark too," he said. "Then someone told me darkness only means light is somewhere else waiting." Did you believe them? I do now. She smiled faintly. When he stood to leave, she said quietly, "Why are you being so kind to me?" He paused by the door, his hand on the frame. "Because once someone was kind to me when I didn't deserve it. Maybe this is me returning the favor." When he was gone, Emily lay awake, watching the light fade slowly. The lavender scent lingered, comforting and painful all at once. She whispered to herself words she had not dared to speak in months. Maybe not everyone wants something. Outside in the corridor, Alexander stopped by the window, looking out at the rain streaking down the glass. For the first time in years, the city felt less empty. He pressed his palm to the cool surface and thought of the woman in the room behind him, and the strange quiet between them that felt like the beginning of something neither of them could name. Late afternoon sunlight pooled across the polished floor of the hospital room, the same golden hue that made the lavender petals near the window seem to glow. Emily sat propped against the pillows, reading a worn paperback. Her hair tied loosely, the color returning to her cheeks. She looked less like a patient now, and more like someone trying to remember what living felt like. Alexander arrived quietly as always, no announcement, no entourage, just the faint sound of polished shoes and the aroma of fresh coffee preceding him. He placed the cup on the table beside her. "You read faster than I expected," he said. She smiled faintly without looking up. "It helps to escape. Does it work sometimes?" He took the chair near the window, his gaze drifting to the skyline beyond. For a moment, neither spoke, the soft beep of the monitor filling the silence. Then she asked, "Do you always bring coffee to people you save?" "Only the ones who pretend they don't need it." "And what makes you think I'm pretending you drink it every morning?" he said with a trace of amusement. Her smile faded slowly. "Maybe I drink it because it makes me feel normal." "Normal's overrated," spoken like someone who's never been judged. His tone softened. "You'd be surprised." Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, the quiet recognition of two people who had seen too much. That night, Alexander sat in his office long after the city lights had blurred into a silver haze. On his desk lay a folder James had brought him earlier, containing the results of the background check. Headlines flickered on the screen. "Nurse involved in photographer scandal vanishes." The articles described a charity photo shoot gone wrong. Accusations of misconduct evidence conveniently lost the man walking free. Emily's name was mentioned, once buried beneath speculation. He scrolled through old photos until he found one that made his breath catch her standing beside a stretcher, her expression distant, the photographer's hand gripping her shoulder too tightly. He closed the file slowly. Something inside him hardened, a quiet fury wrapped in restraint. The next morning he found her by the window, watching the drizzle smear the skyline. "You worked with someone named Leo Harmon," he said carefully. Her fingers stiffened around the cup she was holding. "You shouldn't know that. It was public once. So you did dig into me. I needed to understand what you're running from." "You think you understand?" she asked, voice sharp. "That man destroyed my life. He told the press I seduced him. The hospital suspended me for ethical violations. The case was dropped. I became the problem instead of the victim." Alexander said nothing, his eyes steady on hers. "I tried to start over," she continued, voice trembling, "but every interview ended when they searched my name. I moved apartments twice. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough people would forget." She laughed bitterly. "They never do." He stepped closer but kept his voice low. "What he did wasn't your fault. Tell that to the world that only believes headlines. Then let me help you rewrite them and make yourself the hero she asked." "No," he said, "just the witness." Her throat tightened. She turned away, pressing her hand to the glass. "I don't want to be someone's redemption story." "Maybe you're not," he said softly. "Maybe you're mine." She froze, not knowing how to respond. Outside, the rain thickened into sheets again, tapping against the window like a heartbeat. That night she dreamed of camera flashes and the sound of a man's laughter echoing through the dark. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat. When she reached for the lamp, her hands shook so badly she knocked over the lavender vase. The crash brought Alexander running. He stopped at the doorway and saw her crouched beside the bed, gathering the broken glass, eyes wide with panic. "It's okay," he said gently. "It's just a vase." "It's not," she whispered. "It never stops breaking." He crossed the room slowly and knelt beside her, helping her pick up the shards. His fingers brushed hers. "You're safe," he said, voice steady. "You're not back there." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. He used to say that too, right before her voice cracked. He caught her wrist, gently pulling her hand away from the broken glass. "You don't have to finish that sentence," he said. She breathed unsteadily, trying to calm herself. He stood and fetched a towel, pressing it lightly to a small cut on her palm. "You don't need to be brave right now," he said quietly. "You just need to breathe." She nodded slowly, her body trembling less with every passing second. Later, when the nurse replaced the vase with a new one, Alexander insisted it be filled again with lavender. When the nurse left, he remained by the door, watching her lie back down. "You don't have to stay," she murmured, eyes half closed. "I know," he replied, "but I will." She fell asleep to the sound of rain against the window and the faint hum of the city below. Outside in the corridor, Alexander leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. The image of her haunted face stayed with him long after. In the morning, he brought a new lavender bouquet, freshly cut. She blinked awake to find it there beside the window. "You don't give up easily, do you?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not on people worth fighting for." She looked down, hiding her smile, but her voice softened. "That's dangerous talk for a man like you." "I built an empire out of risk," he said. "This one's no different. You don't even know me. Then let me." She hesitated, then reached for the lavender, brushing her fingertips over the petals. "You keep using light colors," she said. "Purple, gold, white." "You don't strike me as someone who believes in softness. I used to think softness was weakness," he said. "Now I think it's what saves us." Their eyes met again, and in that fleeting silence, something shifted. It was not a confession, nor a promise, but an understanding, that the scars between them, spoken and unspoken, had begun to draw them closer. The sun broke briefly through the clouds, scattering light across the floor, and for the first time, Emily did not turn away from it. By the end of the week, Emily could walk without crutches, and the nurses began discussing her discharge. The bruises on her leg had faded to yellow, but the shadow in her eyes remained. Alexander noticed it every time he stopped by. The room that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed too small, like a fragile shell ready to crack under the weight of the outside world. That morning he arrived earlier than usual, but the nurse at the desk whispered, "You might want to wait. Reporters are outside." He frowned. Reporters. Somehow they know she's here. He stepped into the elevator, his pulse steady but his jaw tight. Downstairs, the flash of cameras greeted him the moment the doors slid open. Voices collided. "Mr. Reed, are you in a relationship with the nurse? Is this another Reed Foundation publicity stunt? Who's the mystery woman?" His driver pushed through the crowd, shielding him toward the car. He didn't answer any questions. Inside the vehicle, his phone buzzed with messages from James. Photos leaked. Someone from the hospital must have sold the story. Emily's picture is everywhere. He swore under his breath. Back upstairs, Emily was sitting on the edge of her bed, her phone vibrating endlessly. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she read the headlines. Billionaire's secret affair with fallen nurse. The same tabloids that once ruined her name were back hungrier than ever. "I can't go through this again," she whispered. When she looked up, Alexander was already there. "Pack what you need," he said. "We're leaving." "What? No, I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "You're not safe here. My penthouse is secure. The hospital can't protect you from this." "People will think they already do," he interrupted. "Let me handle it." She hesitated, but saw the resolve in his eyes, the same unyielding calm that had steadied her in the rain. Within an hour they were gone, escorted through a private exit to a waiting car. The ride was silent. Emily watched the city pass through tinted glass, the skyline glowing coldly under morning light. When they reached his building, the security guards greeted them with quiet respect. The elevator opened directly into a vast living space, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The place smelled faintly of cedar and steel, clean and impersonal, yet oddly comforting. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yes," he said simply. "Now you do too. At least until this dies down." "I can't stay with you," she said. "It'll make things worse. You have nowhere safer," he replied. "There's a guest suite and a private nurse on call. No one will disturb you." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion weighed her down. The city outside looked like a world she no longer belonged to. "You shouldn't be doing this," she murmured. "Why? Because people will think you care?" "Maybe I do." She turned away before he could see her expression. That night she stood by the window, watching rain return to the city, the drops sliding down the glass like tears. Alexander approached quietly, holding 2 cups of tea instead of coffee this time. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "It's too quiet," she said. "You get used to it." "I don't want to." He smiled faintly. "Then talk to me." She glanced at him. "What do people like you talk about, people like me? People with power who pretend it doesn't make them lonely." His smile faded. "I don't pretend." "Then why help me?" she asked. "You could have walked away that night." He looked at the rain-streaked glass, his reflection merging with hers. "Because I saw something familiar. Fear, shame, silence. I used to live with all 3. You a billionaire, Afraid fear built my walls, he said quietly. Money just made them taller. She looked down, her voice trembling. You think you can fix me with sympathy? No, he said, but maybe we can help each other remember what safety feels like. For a moment, neither spoke. The city lights shimmered on the floor between them. She took the tea and whispered, You talk like someone who lost everything. I did, he said. Now I try not to lose people who still have something left. The next day, the tabloids intensified. Paparazzi swarmed the street. Helicopters hovered for shots of the building, and social media turned her name into a trending tag. Emily hid in the penthouse's quiet corners, her anxiety clawing at her chest. Alexander fielded calls from his board, demanding statements, but his focus remained on her. They won't stop, she said one night. They never do. Then we'll outlast them. You'll lose investors. Then I'll build new ones. You'll ruin your reputation. It's just paper, he said. You're not. The simplicity of his tone disarmed her more than any promise could. A few nights later, the rain returned harder than before. Emily woke to thunder shaking the windows. She stepped into the living room where the lights from the city painted the floor silver. Alexander stood there barefoot in gray sweatpants holding a folder. Couldn't sleep, she asked. Not when the world's burning my name, he said with a tired grin. Want to see something? He opened the folder to reveal documents, proof that one of his former assistants had leaked her hospital records. I'm firing him tomorrow and pressing charges. That'll make more headlines. Then let them write about justice for once. She shook her head. You don't owe me this. I don't, he agreed. But I want to. A long silence hung between them. The rain outside softened to a whisper. She stepped closer until they stood only a breath apart. I never thought a man like you could understand fear, she said. He looked at her gently. Fear built my empire. Empathy keeps it from killing me. Her eyes searched his face, and for the first time she saw the weariness beneath the charm, the man behind the myth. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you, he replied. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating their faces in stark relief. She reached up unconsciously, brushing a raindrop from his sleeve, though it was only condensation. He caught her hand briefly, then let go. You should rest, he said. Big day tomorrow, for you or for me, both. She smiled faintly, retreating towards the hallway. As she disappeared into the dim light, he turned back to the window. The city pulsed below, relentless and alive. He realized then that empathy, the thing he had buried for years under business and logic, was no longer a weakness. It was dangerous, because it made him care. And caring could destroy everything he'd built. But for the first time, he wasn't sure he cared about that either. Rain returned to New York with the same quiet persistence that had marked the night they met. It came softly at first, a mist that blurred the skyline, then thickened into silver lines, falling endlessly across the windows of Alexander's penthouse. The sound filled the spaces between heartbeats, a rhythm that Emily had grown used to during the past week of hiding. She moved slowly through the living room, a blanket draped over her shoulders, her limp faint but steady. Her body was healing, though every motion still reminded her of the pain that once made her collapse. Alexander sat at the kitchen counter reading emails on his tablet, his jaw tense. The world outside was still devouring their story, but inside the apartment, the silence between them had changed. It was no longer uncomfortable. It was charged with something fragile, something that could either heal or break them. You should be resting, he said without looking up. Resting feels too much like hiding, she replied. He glanced at her, then closed the tablet. You're not hiding, you're recovering. There's a difference. Yes, he said. Hiding means you're afraid. Recovering means you're learning to stop being afraid. She smiled faintly. That's a very billionaire way of putting it. You say that like it's an insult. It's a compliment, she murmured. You make healing sound expensive. He chuckled softly, the sound unfamiliar even to himself. The tension in the room lightened for a moment, before thunder rolled outside. Emily flinched. Alexander noticed and stood. Come here, he said. Why? Because I said so. He teased gently. She raised an eyebrow, but let him guide her toward the therapy mat his private doctor had set up near the window. You need to move, he said. Your muscles will weaken if you don't. You're not my doctor, she said. I pay him, he countered. That makes me a stakeholder. She laughed despite herself. Fine stakeholder. What now? He extended his hand steady and open. She placed hers in his and slowly rose from the chair. The world tilted briefly, but his grip held her firm. Easy, he whispered. One step at a time. The rain drummed louder against the glass, the sound oddly soothing. She moved cautiously, each step a small victory. When she stumbled, his arm caught her waist. Their eyes met close enough to feel each other's breath. You're shaking, she said softly. Because I don't want to break you, he replied. You won't, she whispered, but her voice trembled. For a moment, neither moved. The world outside disappeared, leaving only the sound of rain and the warmth of two people learning to stand again. He guided her back to the chair and crouched beside her, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. You're stronger than you think, he said. You talk like you know me, she murmured. I'm trying to. The knock on the door shattered the quiet. It was Dr. Levin, his private physician, arriving for the scheduled checkup. Good progress, Levin said, after examining her leg. The wound's healing well. You should be walking unaided within a week. Emily smiled faintly. And the bruises fading fast, he said, glancing at Alexander. You've been taking good care of her. After the doctor left, Alexander poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. You're doing better than the last time I saw you cry, he said softly. She looked away, embarrassed. That wasn't crying, that was leaking. He smiled. Whatever it was real. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the rain streak the windows. You ever wonder, she said finally, if the rain remembers? Remembers what, where it's been? Who it's touched? Maybe it's the same water falling again and again, just changed. He studied her the way she could turn pain into poetry without meaning to. If that's true, he said, then I hope it remembers you. She laughed quietly. That's the most ridiculous thing anyone's ever said to me. Then it worked, he said. The mood shifted again, softer now, the air between them tinged with warmth. That afternoon, he suggested taking her out not far, just downstairs to the Reed Foundation's Rehabilitation Center. I can't, she said instantly. People will recognize me. They won't, he said. I'll make sure of it. He offered his hand again, and this time she took it without hesitation. The car ride was short. The building's lobby gleamed with minimalist elegance, but the therapy floor was different, quiet, filled with plants and gentle light. It smelled of citrus and lavender. As they walked through the hallway, Emily's breath quickened. I can't do this, she whispered. You already are, he said. The physical therapist greeted them warmly, guiding her through stretches and slow steps. Alexander watched from the corner, his expression unreadable but proud. Every time she faltered, she looked at him, and he nodded once a silent assurance. After the session, they stepped outside into the rain again. The sky had turned pale gray, the city softened by mist. He handed her an umbrella. "I can hold it myself," she said. "I know, but I like holding it for you." She rolled her eyes but let him. As they crossed the street toward the car, the flash of a camera exploded nearby. Emily froze. A man in a dark hood lowered his lens, and for a second she saw the ghost of the past, the same glint of exploitation. Alexander turned instantly, his body moving before thought. The man vanished into the crowd. "Who was that?" She whispered, panic rising. "Stay here," he said. "Don't move." But she grabbed his sleeve. "Please don't." "Not again." He stopped, breathing hard. Rain soaked through his shirt, the city spinning around them. He realized then that the storm outside had returned not just to the sky, but to her eyes. He exhaled slowly and said, "All right, we'll go home." In the car ride back, she was silent, staring out the window as rain traced her reflection. "He looked familiar," she murmured finally. "Who the man with the camera? From before?" Maybe she said, her voice barely audible. Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "If it's him, he won't touch you again. I promise." She looked at him, the sincerity in his tone, both comforting and terrifying. When they reached the penthouse, she went straight to the window, watching lightning fork across the skyline. "It's starting again," she whispered. "No," he said, standing behind her. "This time it ends." She turned, her eyes shining in the dim light. "You can't fight every storm, Alexander." "Maybe not," he said. "But I can stand in the rain with you." And for a moment, as thunder rolled and lavender light flickered across their faces, it felt like enough. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of New York morning where the sky seemed to press down on the glass towers, and everyone moved faster to escape the weight of it. Emily woke to the faint hum of the city, far below the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a few seconds she forgot the world outside still had teeth. Alexander was at the counter reading the news, a muscle twitching in his jaw. She saw it before he spoke, the tightness that meant something had gone wrong. "You should sit," he said. "That bad?" she asked, already bracing herself. He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen, a headline blazed in bold letters: "Billionaire's secret nurse, lover the woman. Behind the scandal speaks." Beneath it, grainy photos of her face, their silhouettes near the window, her limp visible. She felt her stomach drop, her pulse quickening. "How someone from inside," he said, his voice flat. "The same assistant who leaked the first story. But there's more," she whispered, scrolling down. The article quoted anonymous sources, claiming she'd manipulated Alexander to gain power, that she'd planned the entire encounter. Her throat burned. "They think I'm using you. Let them think," he said. "I'll deal with it." "You can't," she snapped. "They'll destroy your name too. Names can be rebuilt. You can't." She pushed the tablet away, standing too fast. "I can't stay here. You've already done enough." He reached for her arm, gentle but firm. "Leaving won't make it stop." "It will for you," she said. "You don't deserve to carry my mess." Then who does? His question hit her harder than the headlines. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her chest rose and fell quickly. "You can't fix this," she whispered. "You can't fix me." "I'm not trying to," he said quietly. "I just want you safe." She pulled away. tears stinging her eyes. You think safety's enough. You think hiding behind glass makes the world disappear. I've lived this before. It doesn't stop. It just gets louder. She stormed toward the door, but he caught her wrist again. Where will you go? Somewhere they can't find me. You tried that once, he said. It didn't work. Maybe I didn't try hard enough. Emily, please. His voice cracked on her name, raw in a way she'd never heard. For a second she froze, then pulled her hand free and walked out. The elevator doors closed between them. By the time he called his driver, she was gone. The rain had started again, soft but steady. He stared out at the streaked glass, his reflection blurred by water. James arrived minutes later with another report. The photos came from inside the company. Someone sold security footage. The board wants answers. They'll get them, Alexander said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were cold steel. Find the source. And Miss Carter, I'll find her myself. Across town, Emily stumbled into her old apartment building. The landlord hadn't rented it out yet. The door still stuck the same way it always had. Inside, dust coated the furniture, her old clothes still in a half-packed box. She sat on the floor, exhaustion swallowing her whole. Her phone buzzed endlessly, calls from unknown numbers, messages full of judgment, pity threats. She threw it aside and pressed her hands over her ears. Outside, thunder rolled like a warning. Hours passed. The power flickered, then died. The city dimmed under the storm. She huddled under a blanket, shivering until a knock echoed through the door. She froze. Emily. His voice, relief and fear, collided inside her chest. She opened the door and saw him standing there, drenched eyes searching her face. You shouldn't have come, she said. You shouldn't have left, he replied. She looked away. You can't protect me from this. I can try. Why, you don't even know what's true. He stepped closer. Then tell me. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the steady drum of rain. Finally she whispered, They're right about one thing. I did know who you were that night. I recognized you from the gala posters, but I didn't follow you. I just didn't want help from anyone else. He blinked, processing. That's it. You think that makes me innocent? It makes you human, he said. She shook her head. You don't understand. Every man I trusted wanted something. I thought you would too. Maybe I did, he said quietly. But it wasn't what you think. Lightning flared outside, throwing his face into sharp relief. He looked tired, drenched, yet unshakably certain. She wanted to believe him. Then her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She picked it up instinctively. A familiar voice slithered through the speaker. You're making headlines again, sweetheart. Didn't learn last time. Her blood ran cold. Leo, she whispered. Alexander's expression hardened. He's calling you. She nodded, shaking. He said he has more photos. He's threatening to release them unless I meet him. Where I don't know. You're not going anywhere, Alexander said. You hear me. If I don't, he won't. His tone left no room for argument. He called James immediately, ordering security at every exit of the building. But hours later, when the storm reached its peak, Emily slipped out quietly through the back staircase. The city streets were nearly empty, water pooling at every curb. She walked fast, clutching her coat around her. She hated herself for believing Leo's threats, but some wounds were too old to silence. When she reached the old photography studio downtown, the lights inside were flickering weakly. She hesitated at the door, heart pounding. Inside, Leo stood with a camera hanging from his neck, smirking. You came, he said. I just want it to stop, she whispered. Then pose for me one last time, he said. We can make it disappear. You're sick, and you're naive." He stepped closer, reaching for her. Before he could touch her, the door burst open. Alexander stormed in with 2 security guards. "Step away from her," he ordered. Leo laughed. The billionaire savior himself. "You're done," Alexander said. "Every file, every photo, it's over." The guards restrained Leo as Alexander helped Emily to her feet. She was shaking her eyes, unfocused. "You followed me?" she asked weakly. "I promised I wouldn't let you face him alone," he said, "even if it meant losing everything." She leaned into him, her body collapsing with exhaustion. As they stepped outside, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the soaked streets. He carried her to the car, whispering her name over and over, until she finally whispered back, "You shouldn't have come." "Yes," he said softly, "I should have." Later in the quiet of his car, her head resting on his shoulder, the city lights blurred past like tears on glass. For the first time, neither of them spoke. The betrayal had come and gone like a storm, leaving behind something fragile but unbroken, something that might, against all reason, still be called love. The next morning, the city woke to chaos. News outlets flashed images of Leo being taken away, in handcuffs, and a single headline spread across every screen. Billionaire Alexander Reed exposes industry predator nurse vindicated. The footage from the studio had gone viral. The public, hungry for blood and redemption in equal measure, turned its attention to the story that refused to die. Inside the penthouse, sunlight spilled through the windows for the first time in weeks. Emily sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, the lavender bouquet nearby, wilted but still fragrant. Her body was sore and her mind hollow. The world had changed overnight, yet she still felt trapped in the same loop of fear and disbelief. Alexander stood near the window, speaking quietly into his phone. Release everything he said to James. The video the hospital records the testimonies. No more secrets. He ended the call and turned toward her. "It's over," he said gently. "They know what he did. You're free now." "Free," she repeated, tasting the word like something unfamiliar. "That's what they said last time, too. This time I made sure there's no room for lies." She looked up at him, her eyes red from sleeplessness. "And what about you? The board, the investors? They'll survive," he said. "Money forgives faster than truth. You'll lose everything." "Maybe it's time I did." She stared at him in silence, unsure whether to call it bravery or recklessness. Why, she whispered, "Because I couldn't live another day knowing you were blamed for what he did," he said. "You think justice fixes things? No. But it stops the bleeding." That afternoon, they went to the Reed Foundation headquarters. The building buzzed with reporters' cameras flashing as soon as they appeared. Security held the crowd back. Alexander led her inside through a private corridor. On the top floor, he held a press conference. The room was bright, filled with journalists, the hum of whispers, blending with the faint click of cameras. Emily stood behind him, trembling, every instinct screaming to run. Alexander stepped up to the microphone. "For years, my foundation has fought to protect victims of abuse," he began. "But sometimes power hides behind silence, and silence protects monsters." His gaze swept across the room. "This woman," he continued, gesturing toward Emily, "was branded a liar. She lost her career because men like Leo Harmon believed money could erase what they did. I will not allow that again." The room erupted in questions. "Mr. Reed, are you in a relationship with her?" one reporter shouted. Alexander paused, then said, "No." not a relationship defined by your headlines. What I have is respect for her courage. And that's enough. Flashbulbs exploded. Emily looked at him stunned. His eyes met hers, steady, unflinching. In that moment, she realized he had just tied his reputation to hers in front of the entire world. When it ended, he took her hand and guided her out before anyone could corner her. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air felt clean, almost new. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did. You'll be crucified for it. Then at least for something true." Later that night, the two of them sat on the terrace, the city glowing below like embers. The storm clouds had drifted away, leaving streaks of gold on the horizon. Emily stared at the skyline. "You really think this changes anything?" "It changes everything," he said. "People will talk." "Let them," he replied. "They'll call me the billionaire who lost his empire over a nurse. I can live with that." "I can't," she whispered. "You didn't ask for this. Neither did you." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Do you remember what you said that night? It hurts down there too." Her face flushed. "I shouldn't have, you should," he said. "It was the truth. You were in pain. And I froze because I didn't know how to help without breaking you. Now I know. Sometimes the only way to help is to listen." She looked at him for a long time. "You talk like someone who's spent years rehearsing regret." "Maybe I have," he said. "But this feels like the first thing that isn't scripted." Her hand found his almost by accident. He didn't move, didn't speak, just let the quiet surround them. For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like understanding. Hours passed before she finally spoke. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," he said. "For what?" "For truth to settle." But truth didn't settle easily. 2 days later, the fire started, not literal but corporate. The board called an emergency meeting. They accused Alexander of negligence of using the foundation to pursue a personal agenda. Headlines turned again, this time painting him as reckless, unfit to lead. James met him afterward. "They want you to step down," he said. "You could keep your shares if you apologize. Apologize for telling the truth." "For breaking the illusion," James said quietly. Alexander stared at the city below. "Then let it burn. You'll lose control." "Maybe that's how control ends," he said. He signed the resignation letter that evening. When he returned to the penthouse, Emily was waiting by the window. "It's done," he said simply. "You resigned. I told them the truth and gave them the empire they wanted. Freedom's expensive." She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "You gave up everything." "Not everything," he said. "You're still here." Her eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't have." "I wanted to," he said. "The truth doesn't cost much until you decide to pay for it with your life." She walked to him slowly, her steps unsteady but sure. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," he said. "You saved yourself. I just gave you light when you forgot what it looked like." The rain began again, light and gentle. He turned off the lights, letting the city illuminate the room. The glow danced across their faces. "It's strange," she said, "how the city looks softer when you stop fighting it." "That's because you finally see the light through the smoke," he said. She smiled faintly. "You sound like a poet. I sound like a man who lost his job." She laughed through her tears. He reached up, brushing the hair from her face, his thumb resting against her cheek. "You're free now, Emily. Not because I said so. Because you believed it." Outside, the rain shimmered under the streetlights like liquid glass. The city that once watched them with judgment now seemed to hum with quiet approval. And for the first time, the fire that had burned their names clean felt less like destruction and more like truth, finally finding its light. The following morning, sunlight crept through the sheer curtains, painting golden streaks across the room. Emily stirred awake on the couch, still wrapped in the blanket she had fallen asleep in. For the first time, there was no echo of thunder, no flashing headline, no phone buzzing with accusations, only quiet, only breath. The lavender on the table had dried, but still filled the room with a soft, lingering scent that reminded her of every moment he had stood beside her through the storm. She sat up and found Alexander on the balcony in his white shirt sleeves, the city sprawling behind him. He looked different without the weight of power on his shoulders, calmer yet strangely fragile. "You're up early," she said, stepping out. "Old habits," he murmured. "The city doesn't let you sleep when it's deciding what you're worth." She smiled faintly. "And what's the verdict today?" "Irrelevant," he said, turning to her. "I don't need them to tell me who I am anymore." She watched him quietly before asking, "Do you regret it, losing everything?" "Not everything," said softly, "just the noise." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the city breathe. Then he turned toward her, holding out a small lavender sprig, freshly cut from the garden terrace he had started the week before. "It's surviving better than I expected," he said. "Maybe I'm not as bad with fragile things as I thought." She took it gently between her fingers. "Maybe because this time you didn't try to control it." Maybe he agreed. The air between them thickened with everything they hadn't said. "You don't owe me anything for staying," he said finally. "I didn't save you to keep you." She looked down, her voice soft. "But you stayed when everyone else walked away." "Because I wanted to," he said. "Because watching you fight reminded me what living feels like." Tears pricked her eyes. "You talk like this is goodbye." "Maybe it's the beginning," he said. "We've both been surviving other people's expectations for too long. Maybe now we can stop and do what, start over, without contracts, without conditions." "You mean without promises?" she asked. "Without ownership," he corrected. "Love shouldn't be a negotiation." She took a slow step toward him. "You think this is love?" He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "I think it's what happens when two broken people stop pretending they're whole." Her breath hitched. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You still shake when you hear rain," he whispered. "And I still freeze when I hear silence. Maybe we balance each other out." She laughed softly through her tears. "That's not how balance works. Maybe it is for us." He leaned closer until his voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't have to run anymore. I'm not sure I know how to stop." "Then let me show you." His hand found hers, his fingers tracing the faint scar near her wrist. "This is not a mark of weakness," he said. "It's proof that you stayed." The touch was gentle, reverent. She felt something uncoil in her chest that had been trapped for years. "You think I can forget?" she asked. "No," he said. "But I think you can live with it." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," he said. "It's just worth it." The city below shimmered in the morning light, each window reflecting a fragment of sky. She looked at him again, really looked at him, the man who had risked everything not for redemption, but for truth. And she realized he wasn't her savior. He was her mirror. "You're not who they think you are," she said. "Neither are you," he replied. "That's why this works." She smiled faintly. "You know the worst part of being broken. What you stop believing anyone will stay once they see the cracks." Then maybe, he said, it's time you met someone who finds beauty in the cracks. He reached for her hand, guiding it to his chest. I'm not offering you protection, he said quietly. I'm offering you a place to be honest. Her heart beat fast beneath her ribs. And what if honesty hurts? Then we face it together. She tilted her head slightly. You really think people like us can have something normal? No, he said with a small smile. But we can have something real. The words lingered between them like an oath. He moved closer until their foreheads almost touched. I'm terrified, she whispered. Good, he said. So am I. Means it's real. Their lips met softly. No urgency, no desperation, just the quiet collision of two people who had carried pain too long. The kiss deepened slowly, the world narrowing to breath and warmth, and the steady beat of hearts learning to trust again. When they finally parted, she looked up at him, tears mixing with laughter. It doesn't hurt down there anymore. She whispered the faintest tremor in her voice. He smiled the kind that reached his eyes. Then maybe that's what healing feels like. They stood like that for a long time, the lavender sprig crushed gently between their hands, its scent filling the air like a promise. Later they sat by the window, watching sunlight break through the thinning clouds. What will you do now? She asked. Maybe rebuild, he said, but differently, slower, with more purpose. The foundation can survive without me, but maybe I can build something better with you. You mean a business, I mean a life, he said. She laughed softly. You don't even know what that looks like. Neither do you, he said. So we'll figure it out. She turned her head, resting it on his shoulder. You really think we can be happy? Happiness isn't a place, he said. It's the space between pain and peace. Right now we're standing in it. She smiled, closing her eyes. The city outside hummed with life again, the sound no longer menacing, but alive like a heartbeat. For the first time, the rain that returned later that afternoon didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a benediction. She opened the window, letting the air rush in, carrying the scent of wet earth and lavender. It's beautiful, she murmured. Always has been, he said, watching her. We just had to survive long enough to see it. The sky shifted from gray to gold, and the light poured into the room, bathing them in warmth. He turned toward her, touching her cheek. Emily Carter, he said softly, you taught me that empathy isn't weakness. It's the only thing worth building an empire on. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. And you taught me that not every man walks away when it rains. He smiled and kissed her again, a quiet seal to everything they had survived. Outside the city pulsed, and somewhere below them, the world moved on. But inside the room, time slowed to a hush. Lavender, light, healing, no contracts, just two people who had finally stopped running and found each other where the storm broke. 1 year later, the world had moved on, as it always did, but the story of the nurse and the billionaire still lived in quiet corners of the internet, told not as a scandal, but as something softer, almost sacred. Outside the city, in a small town north of New York, the Reed Carter Foundation had opened its first community center for survivors of abuse. The building sat at the edge of a meadow, where rows of lavender stretched as far as the eye could see. On early mornings, the air smelled of dew and sunlight, and the faint memory of rain. Emily knelt in the soil, her hands dirty, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She wore a light denim shirt, rolled to the elbows, a smear of dirt on her cheek, and the calm of someone who had learned that peace was not perfection, but presence. Alexander walked toward her carrying 2 mugs of coffee, his sleeves rolled up his tie, forgotten on the porch railing. "You're awake before the volunteers again," he said. She smiled, shading her eyes to look up at him. "The plants don't wait for billionaires to finish their meetings." "I told you I'm not a billionaire anymore," he said, setting the mugs beside her. "You're still richer than anyone here." "Not in this dirt," he said, crouching beside her. "Here you outrank me." She laughed softly and pressed another sprig of lavender into the soil. Around them bees drifted lazily through the morning light, and the sound of children laughing carried from the garden's far end. "They planted sunflowers by mistake again," she said. "You love it." "I do," she admitted. "It reminds me not everything needs to be planned." He watched her quietly, his gaze warm. The year had changed them both. His eyes no longer carried the steel cold of ambition, but the steadiness of a man who had found a different kind of purpose. "We're almost ready for the opening ceremony," he said. "You should get cleaned up." "You mean look like someone respectable?" "You look like someone real," he said. She leaned over and kissed him lightly, her hands still covered in earth. "Then that's enough." Later that morning, the center filled with people, survivors, volunteers, friends. Cameras were there too, but their presence felt respectful, subdued. No one shouted questions. No one hunted for scandal. Alexander took the small stage and spoke briefly. "We built this place for those who thought they had no place left," he said. "Healing is not about forgetting the rain. It's about finding someone who stays until it stops." He turned to Emily, standing in the front row, her eyes shining. When the applause faded, she joined him on stage. "You all taught me that pain can end," she said. "Not because we erase it, but because we turn it into something that grows." She lifted a small pot, holding a lavender sapling. This was the first one that bloomed after the storm. "Today we plant it here as a promise that healing will always have a home." Together they pressed it into the soil, while the crowd watched the air filled with the scent of lavender and sunlight. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Emily and Alexander walked along the fence line, hand in hand. The fields rippled under the wind, violet and green stretching into the horizon. "Do you miss the city?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," he said, "but not when you smile." She laughed quietly. "That's a terrible line. It worked, only because you mean it." He smiled, brushing his thumb against her knuckles. They stopped by a bench overlooking the field, sitting in the comfortable silence of 2 people who no longer needed to fill it. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every time it rains," he said. "Not with regret, just gratitude." "For what? For stopping the car?" She rested her head on his shoulder. "I never thanked you properly," she said. "You did," he whispered. "You stayed." The sky began to shift, clouds parting, to reveal a clear blue stretch of morning. A gentle drizzle started soft and brief, as if the world was reminding them that even peace needed rain to grow. She tilted her face upward, letting the drops kiss her skin. "Still afraid of storms?" he asked. "No," she said. "I learned to dance in them." He chuckled. "You always get the last word. That's because you always let me." "That's love," he said. She looked at him, smiling through the soft rain. "Then it's the easiest kind I've ever known." He pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders, both of them watching the lavender sway. The rain stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving the world shining, every petal glistening with light. She whispered, "Do you think we'll ever stop finding new ways to heal?" "I hope not," he said. "Healing means we're still alive." The volunteers called from across the garden, laughter and chatter rising like music. Emily stood brushing the dirt from her jeans. "Come on, Mr. Reed, time to work. You just like giving orders." "Only to you," she said, teasing. He followed her down the path, lined with blooming lavender, the breeze carrying their laughter away into the morning. From a distance, they looked like any ordinary couple, but anyone who had heard their story would know ordinary was the miracle. As they reached the far end of the garden, she stopped and turned, the sunlight catching her hair. Her eyes bright with something that looked like peace. "You realize," she said softly, "this all started because of the rain. And because you whispered the truth," he said. "It hurt," she reminded him. "And it healed," he replied. They shared a quiet smile before walking, on the sound of their footsteps blending with the rustle of leaves. Behind them, the lavender fields shimmered in the sun, endless and alive, a living testament to everything they had endured. Sometimes the hardest storms don't destroy you. They water the roots of the life waiting to bloom. If you stayed with Emily and Alexander's story until this moment, you probably felt it too. The ache, the warmth, the quiet redemption that comes when pain turns into purpose. Their journey wasn't about fairy tale perfection. It was about two broken souls learning that healing isn't found in wealth or power, or even in the promise of forever. It's found in presence. If this story touched your heart, take a deep breath and think of the rain that once scared you, the storm that once made you hide, and the person, maybe even yourself, who stayed until it stopped. That's what this channel is about. Here, every story carries a little piece of light, a reminder that love can begin in the darkest nights and grow roots in the most unexpected soil. Before you scroll away, pause for a second. If you believe that empathy is strength, that kindness still matters, that people can rebuild even after breaking, subscribe. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what moment hit you hardest. Was it when she whispered that it hurt, or when he said healing means staying? Your words remind us why we tell these stories, not for numbers, but for connection. Every view, every comment, every tear means another person found hope again. So if you're watching this late at night feeling small or unseen, know this: you are part of a community that believes in second chances, in quiet love, and in the beauty of starting over. Share this story with someone who might need a sign that it's not too late. Maybe they've been through their own storm. Maybe they've been afraid to feel again. Let this story remind them that the rain always stops. And when it does, lavender grows where the pain once lived. And if you're ready to keep walking with us through stories that heal, hit that subscribe button. Ring the bell and tell me in the comments, what does healing look like to you? Maybe it's forgiveness. Maybe it's falling in love again. Or maybe it's simply waking up and realizing it doesn't hurt down there anymore. This is Emma's Stories, where rain becomes light, love becomes healing, and every ending is just the beginning of another chance to believe.